Over the past few weeks, I've been seeing a lot of talk in the NBA community about how rivalries are starting to fizzle out. Like, sure, you might have modern age rivalries like you're seeing now with the Pelicans and the Suns, but they just don't hit the same. But over the history of the NBA, there are some under the radar rivalries that I think should get more attention. And the one we're going to be talking about today is the one between the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors. What's going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops, and today we're going to be talking about a rivalry between the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors that really not a lot of people have given much light to, and they probably should. So in terms of when they were founded, the Golden State Warriors were founded as the Philadelphia Warriors in 1946, whereas the Chicago Bulls came in 1966. So in the 20 years before the rivalry could exist, the Warriors got it rolling with 2 championships prior to the Bulls ever being founded. They won the first ever championship in 1947 as well as in 1956. Now, here's where the connection all starts. The then San Francisco Warriors traded Guy Rodgers to the Chicago Bulls in the offseason before the Bulls' debut year, and in return, the Warriors got back Jim King, Jeff Mullins, and cash. This was a big move because Rodgers is in the Basketball Hall of Fame and was already a 3-time All-Star and a 1-time assist leader in the league for the Warriors. In his first year with the Bulls, he was once again an NBA All-Star, he led the Bulls in points per game, and he led the league in assists for the second time of his career. However, he would retire in 1970. This is pretty interesting though, because back then the playoff format was a little different than it is today. The Warriors were 44-37, the Hawks were 39-42, Lakers were 36-45, and the Bulls were 33-48, while all making the playoffs. But in the playoffs, the first and third best record in the West, which was the Warriors and Lakers, played in the first round, whereas the second and fourth seed in the West, which was the Hawks and Bulls, they played first. So by today's alignment, the Bulls and Warriors would have also played in the playoffs in the Bulls' debut season. Now, in terms of the head-to-head record, the Warriors still probably would have won in the playoffs, but believe it or not, the Bulls won the first ever head-to-head matchup with the Warriors, which was also their first home game in Chicago Bulls history. And after this, the Warriors would win 10 of the 12 matchups together, and by December 9th, 1967, they were 10-3 over the Bulls head-to-head for their history. But once the 1970s came around, it did not take long before the Bulls would eventually rewrite the script. Over the next 4 years, from 1970 to 1974, the Chicago Bulls had a better regular season record by 30 games over this span than the now Golden State Warriors. And by November 24th, 1972, the Bulls managed to even the score at 22-22 in head-to-head all-time. Then it was tied again at 25-25, and then at the end of the 1973-1974 season, it was tied again at 27-27. And the Warriors knew changes had to be made. Not only were the Bulls getting the best of them, but the Warriors were starting to slide, as most of this time was without one of their star players who went to the ABA, that being Rick Barry. Now, of course, he did return in the 1972-1973 season, and another factor was ticket sales, which the Warriors were ranked last in the league in the department by 1974. Therefore, a change had to be made, and it was, of course, with the Bulls. So there was a critical trade made on September 3rd, 1974, where the Chicago Bulls received Nate Thurmond from the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors received Clifford Ray, as well as a 1975 first-round pick, which later became Joe Bryant. The Warriors saw the writing on the wall. I mean, although Thurmond, the playoffs the year before, did a great job at shutting down Kareem, he was clearly getting older. Thurmond was 33 and basically on his last legs, whereas Clifford Ray was only 25 and had potential to be a solid big man for them for many years to come. This made sense for the Bulls because, to be honest, they were in win-now mode. Over those past 4 years, sure, they won 50 games every time, but they really had nothing to show for it. No titles, no finals appearances, not even a conference finals appearance. By this time, Bob Love was 32, Jerry Sloan was 32, Chet Walker was 34. The youngest guy in their core rotation was Norm Van Lier, who was 27. So this made sense to go all in. And when these teams faced the 4 times in the 1974-1975 regular season, it looked like it was working well for the Bulls, who won the season series 3-1 and were now up all-time 30-28 on the Golden State Warriors. Despite this though, the Warriors were still first in the West with a 48-34 record, and the Bulls finished second with a 47-35 record. Both won in the first round 4-2, and what do you know, here we are. 9 years later from the Guy Rodgers trade, the first year after the Nate Thurmond trade, and the two teams who have already had a history with one another are meeting in the playoffs in the 1975 Western Conference Finals. Now, Game 1 of this series was the Warriors from the start, who won 107-89. Behind Rick Barry with a 38-5-4 performance, and Jamal Wilkes had 26-9. Outside of Bob Love's 37, nobody on the Bulls really showed up this game. But Game 2, Chet Walker and Norm Van Leer were playing much better and got a very narrow 90-89 victory over the Warriors. And Norm Van Leer wasn't done by Game 3, as he dropped 35 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, 3 steals, and a block in a Bulls 108-101 victory to give them a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, the Warriors responded, winning 111-106, despite the Bulls being up 35-18 after the first quarter. Rick Barry had 36 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. Now, up until this point, every home team had won. Weirdly enough, back then in the NBA, they followed a 1-2-2-1-1 format for these series. But the trend changed in Game 5 as the Bulls won 89-79 as the road team. But in Game 6, the Warriors got them back, winning 86-72 as Rick Barry had 36 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 block, and a remarkable 7 steals. This was it. Game 7. These two teams might never get another chance in this era. The Bulls were clearly an older team, while the Warriors are nearing the final years of Rick Barry. They both needed to win now. In the first quarter, the Bulls went up 21-16, which later became 47-36 by halftime. The Warriors had to turn it into another gear, and in the third quarter, outscored the Bulls, and the score going into the fourth quarter was a 65-59 Bulls lead. And with just over 3 minutes left in the game, it was tied at 73-73. It was now or never. Jamal Wilkes finished a layup in transition to go up 75-73 before a Bulls timeout. And after a Chet Walker miss, Rick Barry took the ball, went left and buried a shot to make it 77-73. And on the next trip down, Van Leer evened it up with a jumper of his own, 77-75 Warriors. After a Warriors turnover and a miss by Van Leer for the Bulls, Phil Smith grabbed it and threw it ahead to Rick Barry for the layup to make it 79-75. Following a Bob Love miss, Tom Boerwinkle committed a foul on the turnover. The Warriors ran a play that threw 2 people at Phil Smith and left Rick Barry wide open for a jump shot. But rather, he threw it into George Johnson for a great dish and finish. And they say that guy never passed. But then Rick Barry grabbed Van Leer and sent him to the free throw line, where he would make both, and the score is now 81-77 Warriors. On the next play, Barry missed a running shot, and Chet Walker got the rebound, fed Boerwinkle in transition, where George Johnson sent the ball back as the screen couldn't even keep up with it. Chet Walker got a great look at a layup but missed and ultimately committed a foul on Rick Barry, who gave them 83, and from there it was over as Golden State won 83-79, along with the series 4-3, and advanced to the NBA Finals. I may be a Bulls fan, but this might be one of the greatest games in NBA history and definitely among games that don't really get much attention. So it's definitely underrated, and I'm going to leave a link to it in the description of this video as well. The biggest difference was shooting down the stretch. Doesn't that seem ironic even in 1975, almost a half century before the likes of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and so on, that the Warriors won this game because of their ability to shoot the basketball and shoot it well. 50% from the field in the fourth quarter is what they were, while the Chicago Bulls were only 15%. Remember, the Bulls were up 3 possessions going into the last quarter because, as we know now, the 3-point line wasn't in the NBA yet, so a 6-point lead was a 3-possession lead. But I'm sure you're all wondering, where was Nate Thurmond? Well, the Bulls grew to realize that the Warriors were right by this time. Even though he started for the Bulls during the regular season, Thurmond was clearly getting older, and he wasn't the same. If you know me whatsoever, I don't discredit a player for simply not looking like a basketball player or the weak era nonsense. Rather, I discredit them because they suck. And Tom Boerwinkle, who was the Bulls starting center pretty much the entire playoffs, was not a great basketball player. But here's the thing, the fact that he needed to play 40 minutes a game, while Thurman could only generate 8 minutes, 2 points, and 2 rebounds, is just terrible, because the bench hurt the Bulls so badly in this game, and the Warriors outscored them 26-3 in this department. That doesn't all go on Nate Thurmond, obviously. He was never known as an elite scorer, except maybe in his heyday. At this point in time, he really wasn't expected to be, but he does get some share of the blame for that as well. So what about the other side of the trade with Clifford Ray? Was he doing anything for the Warriors? Not really, no. And even though Ray started, this is why they closed games with George Johnson as the big, along with Phil Smith running point. 2 guys off the bench. The Bulls just didn't have that depth. 4 Bulls players played 40 minutes or more in this game, 3 above the 46-minute mark, and Bob Love played the full 48. While the leader for the Warriors was Rick Barry, who only played 39 minutes. The Bulls were that close. Just a little reliability off the bench, but it wasn't going to come from Nate Thurmond himself. And in the NBA Finals, the Warriors won in a sweep over the Bullets. So theoretically, the Bulls very well could have won this year if they closed out the series, but they didn't. As it is probably expected, they started blowing up the team. Chet Walker retired. Thurman became the 10th man that missed almost 70 games. Jerry Sloan missed 60 games, and they were unable to make it back this far until a guy named Michael Jordan came along in the 1984 NBA draft. Now, in terms of player movement between both organizations right after this time, the only notable trade was the Chicago Bulls receiving Charles Dudley and the Golden State Warriors receiving a 1979 second-round pick, which became Danny Salisbury. Now, by 1984, when Michael Jordan was drafted, the Bulls were surprisingly still ahead all-time 46-43 in head-to-head for the regular season, mainly thanks to the years of Reggie Theus and Artis Gilmore. Realized that 1975 was essentially now or never for not just the Bulls, but also the Warriors. I mean, they were still a contending team until about 1977, but then Rick Barry was out of there and they basically fell off the map much worse than they did even in 1974 when they couldn't sell a ticket. Now, over the first 8 seasons of the Michael Jordan era, his Bulls would win 9 of the next 15 games to place the Bulls on top of the head-to-head matchups 55-49. Most of this is because while the Bulls had a star duo on the rise, the Warriors still had a great rise in the late 80s, early 90s with the Run TMC era, dedicated to their big 3 of Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin. But the 1990s decade was dictated not only in this rivalry by the Chicago Bulls, but also in NBA history. After November 5th, 1991, the Bulls proceeded to have the longest winning streak in this rivalry's history of 13 straight games, pushing the score to 68-49 all time. The Bulls wouldn't lose to the Warriors again until after their final championship in 1998, which, as we all know, they had just won 6 of them in 8 seasons in the 1990s, and 6 in the 6 full seasons that Michael Jordan played over this stretch. Now, this era is not just noted by what MJ, Pippen, Phil, and the Bulls accomplished in terms of winning. They also had a history of making moves from the front office, and there are 2 to note in the 1990s decade from the trade deadline between both these teams. On February 23, 1993, the Chicago Bulls received Ed Nealy, and the Golden State Warriors received a 2001 second-round pick. And on February 19th of 1998, the Chicago Bulls received David Vaughn, a 1998 second-round pick that became Shammond Williams, and a 2000 second-round pick that became A.J. Gutton. The Warriors received Jason Caffey on the other end of this deal. These were all the moves that Chicago Bulls made in the 1990s decade at the trade deadline, which makes sense because they were an elite team, so they wouldn't have to change much. But it's just funny that the only moves that they made were deals with the Warriors. And sure, you could say that maybe Jerry Krause was close with the Warriors executives, but over this time frame of their 2 trades together, the Warriors had 4 different GMs in less than 5 years. Now, following the last Bulls championship in 1998, both the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors weren't relatively great again until several years later. Both made some playoff pushes, but went no further than the second round prior to drafting their next star players, which was Derrick Rose in 2008 for the Chicago Bulls and Stephen Curry in 2009 for the Golden State Warriors. Over those years, there were some transactions involving these teams to note, though. On February 16, 2000, the Chicago Bulls received John Starks, Bruce Bowen, and a 2000 first-round pick that became Chris Mim, whereas the Warriors received Larry Hughes and Billy Owens. Now, this was also the trade that sent Tony Kukoc to the Philadelphia 76ers. It was almost cruel for the Warriors to do this as well to Chicago because Bulls fans did not like John Starks for many years based on his years with the Knicks. I'm sure a lot of Bulls fans probably don't even remember him on the team because that part of their memory was not very fun. Also, on July 22nd, 2010, the Chicago Bulls received CJ Watson from the Warriors via a sign-and trade. Now, he served as one of the main backups to Derrick Rose during the 2011 MVP campaign, as well as the 2011-2012 season, both of which the Bulls held the best record in the NBA. And on June 28th, 2012, the Golden State Warriors drafted Draymond Green 35th overall. Now, why is this relevant? Well, many people don't remember that Tom Thibodeau, Ron Adams, and the Chicago Bulls coaching staff wanted to select Draymond Green with the 29th overall pick, and they had a chance to do so. However, Gar Forman and John Paxson, out of spite, decided to pick Marquise Teague. Just imagine Draymond Green in a Tom Thibodeau system, especially with the injury logs to come after that for guys like Boozer, Noah, and eventually Gasol. Now, by this time in 2012, the Bulls were leading 79-63 head-to-head all-time, and despite 2012-2013 being an injury-riddled year for the Bulls and a breakout for the Golden State Warriors, the Bulls still swept the season series that year too. And in the 2014-2015 season, the Warriors started the season off 2-1 at home. Over their next 38 home games that year with the final 5 months of the season, they proceeded to end the year 37-1. Now, that one loss came to the Chicago Bulls, who were without Jimmy Butler in this game. Derrick Rose had 30 points and 7 rebounds. Gasol and Noah both had a double-double, and gave what could have been a finals preview had Game 4 of the Bulls-Cavs playoff series not been somewhat affected by a critical missed excessive timeout call that ultimately could have gave the Bulls a 3-1 series lead. However, the Warriors would win the championship that year and would follow this up by going 73-9 for the season next year, the all-time best regular season record in NBA history. Previously held, remind you, in the 1995-1996 NBA season by the Chicago Bulls. And while Stephen Curry also became the first ever unanimous MVP, the Bulls still got the last laugh with the best record to win a title because the Warriors did blow a 3-1 lead to LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. But then in the summer of 2016, the Warriors added Kevin Durant, and they split in the season series with the Chicago Bulls that year. The Bulls' one win against the Warriors this year, on March 2nd, 2017, was the last time that they were above 500 since the last regular season in real life, 2021-2022. However, after that game, the Warriors would go on a streak and have since won 11 straight games against the Chicago Bulls, including winning the 2017, 2018, and 2022 NBA championships. However, that streak did come to an end this season as the Chicago Bulls most recently got the last win in the head-to-head. And also since this game, there was kind of a rumor that before Patrick Beverley did sign with the Chicago Bulls, that the other team he was considering was the Golden State Warriors. Those were his two finalists after being bought out by the Orlando Magic. So where the head-to-head stands all-time as of right now, in this current day, is that the Chicago Bulls lead the Golden State Warriors 85-79. In order for the Warriors to tie them all-time, they would need to extend a winning streak from now until the end of the 2025-2026 NBA regular season. But it's just so crazy how these two teams that seem to have no affiliation with each other actually have a lot of connection. From the Guy Rodgers move before the Bulls started playing, to the 1975 Western Conference Finals, to the Bulls dynasty in the 90s, to Run TMC, to Derrick Rose, to Stephen Curry, to the regular season team records, to the Warriors' recent success, to the whole Draymond Green thing, and so on. While we don't know how many great years the Warriors have left with this core group, they have just won their 7th championship in history, breaking the tiebreaker between these two franchises. While the Bulls' peak dynasty has reached a higher mark than any sole dynasty in Warriors history, it's going to take more than just Michael Jordan to eclipse the Warriors' ring total. Simultaneously, the iconic level of the Bulls' constant logo throughout the history is something that brings them out against every other team. while some fans would have to relocate to watch the Warriors over these years. However, this rivalry is tight and essentially anything can happen in the years to come. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You guys know that I'm a Bulls fan, and I don't think there's any one player who has put a team on the map more than Michael Jordan did with the Bulls in his day, which has made them one of the most popular fan bases in not just the NBA, but all of pro sports. I mean, across the country, internationally, you find Bulls fans everywhere. However, if we were looking at some of the next closest things to be doing that, I think what Stephen Curry has done for the Golden State Warriors would deserve some flowers in that discussion as well. The ring total, the head-to-head, and the transaction ties are all so related that I think this is one of the most intriguing under-the-radar rivalries in the NBA. But yeah, that's basically going to do it for the video.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me who you think is the better franchise here, the Bulls or the Warriors, or just who you prefer.
I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and I'm out. Peace.